It is a pleasure for me to be here to share with you my experience in teaching human rights, especially for the undergraduate. I'm actually teaching two human rights class. So one is on human rights and international politics, and another one is on human rights in Southeast Asia. And these two courses, I have been using different techniques of teaching, different preparation as well. So why are they different? Because in the context of Malaysia, teaching human rights can be challenging in terms of the understanding of people about the human rights, because basically in our educations, human rights is not a topic that we touch, especially in the school and so forth, before they actually enter the university. Hence, the differences between the two courses that I'm teaching. For human rights and international politics, it is an elective course in my department, Department of International and Strategic Studies. So listening to the name of the departments, it is a department on international relations. It is not a department on political science. Hence, when we are doing the undergraduate teachings, the discipline that we are at and so forth have become one of the challenges and will actually affect the way that the different techniques that I use. So the other course is human rights in Southeast Asia. So human rights in Southeast Asia is a relatively new course that I'm going to be teaching for the third time. So this is a much easier and a beginner level of the course, which is offered to all the university students in the entire universities. So that means my students can come from either my own faculty, arts and social sciences, or coming from the students from other faculties, including science faculty, engineering, and so forth. So I will be expecting the diversities when it comes to the students. But the beauty of the two, when I'm comparing with it, is that in the context of University Malaya, I not only have local students, but also international students. So that is another diversity that I have in my class. For the human rights and international politics, it is a third-year course. So the level is rather high. That means towards undergraduate students who is going to graduate in another half years. Yet, not all of them are actually familiar what is human rights. And sometimes when in the first class, when we talk about Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there might be difficulty. So how do I overcome all these challenges? So there are some of the techniques that I'm using in these two courses. How do we prepare the syllabus? So in the context of University Malaya, it is quite organized and systematic in terms of the synopsis, and the course learning outcomes are already there when we drafted out and designed the syllabus. So I did not design the human rights and international politics because it has been there, but taking over from other lecturers, I am allowed to actually change my syllabus in terms of we have 14 weeks. So I am free to actually adjust the topics that I can use. So one of the way that I'm using is that to keep myself updated with what's happening when it comes to human rights and its linkage with the international politics that is relevant to international relations. The reason of that is very much related to the techniques that I'm using, because when you deal with the students that is very diversified, some might have more knowledge on human rights than the others. Some might be more active than the others. Hence, the updates of, let's say, the Ukraine and Russian war can be one of the things that I use in my class as a case studies. And because those are the things that my students, when it comes to studying international relations, they are more aware. So I'll have to find the case studies that are more familiar for them before I go and touch on the issues that they might not be familiar. So in this case, also the issues of LGBT, which can consider as quite sensitive and taboo in Malaysia, is also often being used in my class, because that is the way to trigger their mind of trying to think, why is it there's so much of resistance against LGBTs or even the groups such as migrants and the refugees? So the preparation of the human rights in Southeast Asia is designed fully by me, in which I actually use a Shapeseed textbook fully for the students. And so far, after testing the 2 rounds of the students, it has been quite useful. So for that course, in which I'm dealing with a different type of students, I normally use the techniques such as the visualizations of information. That means I provide videos, pictures, or even the incidents that are happening. Although it is about human rights in Southeast Asia, I also sometimes in the first class, I face the challenge where the students, because they are not all coming from the social science, they might be from science. So they do not even know Southeast Asia means there are 11 countries. They might miss out some of the countries, and some of them have zero knowledge about the issues that are happening. Hence, the way to tackle it is that one, I find out the countries that these students coming from, majority Malaysians, but they can be international students. So I will pick the case studies and the examples that are happening and very controversial and close to them. So that they can actually have some discussions and to provide the powerful images or pictures for them. So when it comes to action learning, that is one thing is that in both of my classes, I normally have guest lecturers, not only the academic missions, but mainly I get practitioners as in the activists who have been in the field for some years. Or sometimes I will have a mixture. That means if a young person who has been exposed to many other human rights issues and so forth to actually speak to them. So there can be some form of the peer learning in that. So project-based learning is something that I use for my class on human rights in Southeast Asia, because this group of students do not have, generally, are not really being trained or exposed to the human rights knowledge. Only perhaps in each class, there are 5 to 10% of them who are more active. That means they might have the student activism background and so forth. Yeah, but very often I find that student activists do not necessarily understand human rights. They do activism, but they do not receive the education when it comes to the foundation of human rights itself. So they can be very political. So when they champion for human rights, it is in a political form. That means they are not familiar with UDHR. They are not familiar with the 9 international human rights treaties. They might not even familiar with if the country have a national human rights institutions, and they are not also familiar with what other laws and so forth that actually related to human rights. So those are the missing things that I try to provide in the class. That means the foundation of it when you're doing human rights advocacy later and so forth. Those are the knowledge that you need to have. So project-based learning helps in terms of this, whereby for the human rights in Southeast Asia course, I normally divide them into small groups of 5 to 6 students, and they will be given one specific topic that guide them through the whole 14 weeks of the whole course. So that means one of the topics that I use is death penalty. Death penalty is a very interesting topic when it comes to the context of Southeast Asia, because some are abolitionists, but some are retentionists. So those are the things that, and also in the context of Malaysia, when it comes to death penalty, it is also related to religion. So religion is often a very highly debated issues here. So those are the things that I use when it comes to project-based learning, something that is close to them, but yet they might not have sufficient knowledge or understanding about that. So the outcomes that I normally ask them to produce for the human rights in Southeast Asia class and the human rights and international politics class is not the same, because human rights and international politics is part of a program of Bachelor of Arts, International and Strategic Studies. So their outcomes are more fixed in terms of writing, analysis, and so forth. But the other class is more relaxed because it's only 2 credit hours without final exam, only continuous assessment. So based on the topics, they will actually do group discussions, presentations, and then via the videos that I show and many other things. And also one of the outputs that I have asked and tested is that they can produce infographic. So infographic is the one that they produce, or even comics or videos or whatsoever that they can actually come about. So one of the experience is a group of students actually produce the death penalty poster, which is quite amazing. The design was very, very simple, yet it is powerful. So those are the things that then I asked them to use their own social media to post it with the course code, but it is not compulsory. So that is the way that, you know, they try to speak up about human rights and things. First, but on top of all of this, the very first thing in the first class is always about the safe space that they have. That means to ensure that whatever that we discuss and whatever that we learn in the classroom and the discussion will stay in the class, and it is a safe space for them to actually express themselves. So that's a channel for them to actually approach me when they are not comfortable. And the independent studies is mostly being used for 2 classes as well, because reading is very important when it comes to human rights topics, especially on the human rights and international politics. Some independent studies, as in, I will provide some of the reference materials, especially nowadays, there's a lot of ebooks and articles and things like that that I will actually upload in our centralized learning platform for them to refer to. So these are some of the teaching techniques. The mode of assessments. So there are different types of assessment. So for one of the course is with the final exam, and the other one is without the final exam. So on the both formative and summative, for the formative, on the continuous assessment, as I just now mentioned, for the human rights in Southeast Asia, it is mostly on the project-based learning. And then for the other course, we have continuous assessment and the final exam. But one of the key highlight is that presentation, the public speaking. So those are the things that, you know, they speak freely in front of the students and things about the issues that they learn. So during the first class, one safe space is there. And the other thing is that I always emphasize there is no right or wrong in their approach. Even if they think death penalty should not be abolished, they are free to express themselves, but explain why are you having that approach. So that is where we slowly guide the whole group of students to agree to the disagreement. So those are the space that we have. And my last is that some of the in Myanmar, you might still continue to do the online teaching. So of course, online teaching and the physical teaching, this time around, we are finally back in physical teaching. So our students are all back in the campus, in which we have managed to overcome some of the challenges that we face. Nevertheless, I must say that some of the practices that are being used during online teaching continue to be used today. That is one of the things that is about guest lecturers. That means in the past, people are not open when it comes to, you know, inviting you to give a speech online. But now everybody's adjusted to it. Although it is a physical class or an online class, a guest lecturer who stay online, just like what we are doing now, is acceptable. So previously people will say, you know, we need money for travel and things like that. So those challenges have been eliminated. So that is the opportunities. So the challenges is the technology, of course. However, for the technology barriers. One is the internet access, but normally in the class we will check with the students first, how is the internet access. So I am quite lucky and privileged in terms of I do not face that much of problems in terms of internet access. Hence, that helps me in terms of getting trainer to come for my human rights in Southeast Asia class, or the human rights in international politics. Means sometimes I have one sessions that I get human rights expert who are more familiar in terms of conducting training. It can be physical or online. So for the online, they have the specific methods and ways like Kahoot and many other things that they are actually using. So those are the different things that we use. But I recognize that the online teaching can be not a good way to go when you're using too many tools if you do not have a good internet access among the students. But this can be adjusted by checking with the students how accessible they are when it comes to the different tools that they have. That is where we adjust the usage of the different applications and many other things. I think those are the things that I would like to share. Thank you very much.
So I think my presentations will cover actually about four of five actually topic. The first is about the human rights course itself, and then who, the students, teachers, as well as the curriculum materials and teaching methods. And the last is basically challenges and best practice. The human rights courses. So we have actually two different type of courses. The first is actually integrated one, which is actually integrated in the existing courses, like for example, criminal law, criminal procedure law, law and society, public international law. They somehow actually mentions about human rights and discuss a bit here and there. However, is really much limited into the specific topic, because it's actually linked into the main principal topic. And then the second of all, we have also separated course with the title Law and Human Rights. And this course is basically mandatory for all law students. There is also what is it called, the voluntary natures, because we have actually national independent course, meaning that in other places, the student in other places who willing basically to take a course, specific course offered, they can do it actually, but only for a specific course. But for the human rights course, for the separated human rights course, we are open for any other students all over Indonesia who willing basically to take the course. The program is called the independent program. And for the human rights course, it's required basically that the student have a basic knowledge on many legal principles, and therefore this course is offered basically at semester 6 or 7. And then the objectives are very limited. Basically, students get knowledge on the introduction of human rights and selected human rights issues. And the second of all, to analyze the current situation by using the human rights-based approach. That's basically the specific course. And then who are the teachers? The teacher is basically, we have a teaching team, and it's pretty much actually based on the law that we have a qualifications, has to be at least master degree, expertise on the specific topic assigned, because we have actually thematic issues. And then no need to have a human rights background, education and courses. However, we have additional requirements among the human rights teachers in our faculty, which is we have to be a member of human rights centers, because that's the way basically we ensure the quality of each of the every lectures. And then the education so far, we have 3 professors involved and 4 PhD, and then 3 master's lectures. And usually we have the routine capacity building courses. You used to have specific courses for us. However, now I think everyone is so busy. So instead we buy books from outside, and then we have actually mandatory joint articles among us. And we also have a couple projects, which is actually human rights projects involving all of us. So at least we are basically enhance ourselves by doing the projects. And then who are the students? And this is the problems. We have 4 undergraduate programs: regular, parallel, evening, and international classes. For the first 3, basically are conducted in Indonesian language. For the international class, there will be that's in English. And we have in total about 400 to 900 students annual. So it's compulsory for them to receive or to join the human rights course, the separated human rights course. And of course, there are some requirements. At least they should already taken some legal principle courses like criminal, civil, administration, public or private international law. And the curriculum and scoring. We have usually what we give is international human rights law, the history of human rights, basic principle of human rights, and thematic issues. Because we have like 700 students, and we have only 10 lectures. So it's like a burden from both of us, actually, from us as the lecturers, I think as well as for the students, because the course itself is only 2 credits. The students sometimes complain saying that this is 2 credits, but it feels like 10 credits because it's like a lot of things that we require them. It's not we basically which requiring them, but rather the university imposes this mid-test, final test, individual assignment, as well as the group assignments. So the flexibility actually lies on the percentage. So we put the group assignment for 20%, 10%, 40%, and 30%. And considering that we have to give a score for 700, and there was one time 900 students, so we try all the possibilities using the electronic devices like programs. Like, for example, we have the Google Class, we have the EMAS, that's basically the University of Indonesian online platform. So we try our best basically to meet all the requirements. And going back to the thematic issues, one which is actually compulsory is access to justice. Why? Because we are law students. And they need basically to know the nitty-gritty of the access to justice. And then there is the individual freedom that consists of the freedom of expressions, religious freedom, free from servitude to slavery, and right of woman and right to life. Every year we have, as lecturers, we are struggling which thematic issue we should actually give to them, because it's based on our expertise, also our interests, and also the burning issues outside there, you know, in the context of Indonesia. So every year it might be actually different. This is basically based on our student evaluations, and this is in 2019, because at that time we had actually the offline courses. 2020, 2021, we have online, full online courses, and then now is already offline courses. 2019, so most of the time we have lectures, but combinations with discussions, simulations. We also have a study visits. Usually we go to the prison because we have a good relationship with the Ministry of Law and Human Rights. And others, it can be actually role play. It can also be group discussion or group actually work. But then again, we have to deal with 700 students, divided usually with the 5 or 6 classes. Sometimes we don't have any place to accommodate them. So we have really to be strategic, like in the morning, afternoon, evening. So it's a bit complicated. And then in terms of the material, references, and modules, we have most of the students saying that we have apparently modules, we have references that we use, and we have the Shapshi also book as one of our reference, mandatory references. And then it's like few actually complain about no module or no references. And the challenges basically is that we have too many students. And then it's burden from us. It's also burden for them. As I said before, this is only 2 credits, but it feels like 10 credits because we are so demanding too. And then the second of all, we are lacking of the updated references. because especially relating to the issues of Indonesia, because Indonesia is so many burning issues that we wanted to cover. And this is like really a struggle, our struggle basically to pick and choose, to prioritize. Also lack of practical nature. So one of the evaluations said that one of the students said that it's actually there's no practical natures, but again we are too ambitious. We wanted to cover everything, but it's just little time, because we have only 90 minutes every sessions, and then usually we have about 12 sessions for the whole semester, 12 to 14 sessions, -2 for the mid-test and final tests, so become 12 or even 10. And then there was also a complaint for the student. It's like too general. They wanted basically to have in-depth discussions, but that's also an issue for us. And then from the lecture perspective, we have actually diversity of knowledge between lectures. Most of the time, because they are, when we pick up actually the team or the subjects, and then we offer to our members, and then many of them say like, oh, I cannot, I cannot. They are just, pinpoint to others. In the end, usually it's like only 4 people, 4 lecturers actually conducting the whole course. Therefore, we need a new blood basically. The reflection is that so far there's been an increase of quality. Well, our from the lectures perspective, that we basically more aware, and there are many actually materials available there. It's just the lack of reference on peace educations. This is something we wanted basically to insert, but then again, the ambitiousness of us hinder the process. And then we also wanted to expand, but it seems like it's we are tight already. And then again, the program itself, we have a good support from the faculty, as well as from the university, as well as from the national government, because this is actually our own kind of fault, because like 10 years ago, we really advocated for human rights to be included in our curriculum, mandatory curriculum. It turned out to be, wow, it's a boomerang for us. We are happy, but at the same time, it's like too much burden. And then the student itself, many actually do not really express their interest. So they just come because they need to come, and then they just get a point, and that's it, And I think when it comes to support, we don't have any complaint. In fact, we are also offered to invite guest lectures if we want, and usually have to be announced in the beginning. So because it has consequences on the financial support which we receive from the faculty. I think that's a good part of the support from the faculty. More challenge on how we organize ourselves, and also how to make students basically interested in the issues itself, considering that, again, prioritizations becomes our main, struggle every year. Thank you. I stop here.
My class is BA. I established this course since 2014, and then start teaching in 2015. And the course approach that when I start designing this, I just have to look at MU, Mahidol University education strategies. And I realized that, I just try to start with something that may interest students. So, but then the course approach that I tend to use, student-based interest approach, just propose and then let them share what they really want to study. And the course syllabus, I tend to invite students to really design the course syllabus with me, including, the human rights issues and particularly the assessment, because as students, when they take this course, it's an elective course. So they tend to concern about the grade. That's why they come to take this course normally. So I tend to ask them what kind of, assessments that they want me to really assess them. And they say they prefer like TikTok, if they want to present something, they want to use TikTok or infographic or video clips to share the knowledge and, and what they've learned, from this course. And then another concepts that I tend to use is global citizens and global talents, in order to ensure that, when students finish this course, they will be able to discuss about human rights issues with others, even though it's not really in-depth discussion, but at least they understand human rights principles and concepts. And then another one is employability, as many students who take this course, they tend to expect that they can really apply, this course, and then they can put this course in their profile and work. I got a feedback from students who study in, pure science, like engineering, email me and say, Azan, you know what, I got a job, and because they asked me about human rights, and I have to, work with migrant workers. So they asked me how I should treat, these workers, and I think that they like the way I apply the human rights, principle to potential workers or colleagues. So this kind of thing that I normally use for this approach for my course. And then preparation, of course, syllabus. I graduated from law school, so I pretty much like, basic things that I can do, just put thematic issues based on UN legal instruments, which I would say at the beginning, I have to, struggle a lot. And so that's why I start with something that I learned first, and then later on I ask students and ask other lecturers, to help me, to guide me as well. So it's kind of, learning by doing at the same time when I try to revise the course syllabus every year. And then another thing is that specific groups of marginalized people. So I tend to ask students as well, if, which group that they're really interested, to learn about the human rights issues. And one of them really in trend is like LGBTIQ. And particularly, students have no idea about this group of people at all, or refugees or asylum seekers. They don't even know who they, the student don't know who they are, what kind of person, they are. And then the course agreements, normally before the class gonna start, I normally ask students, okay, we should make agreements, what you like or you don't like, your colleagues to do. So first thing is about safe space, that we have to agree that, everyone gonna respect for different opinions, among colleagues. And they really like that, because they realize that, when they in their own department or faculties, they feel that they could not even talk or share something different from other colleagues. So this is from them. And then the class attendance and this class discussions, I tend to ask them, to follow, because it's going to affect their grades if they attend, if they miss the class over 3 times. So, but more important is about discussion in class. We agree that everyone's supposed to say something, that they think that they want to share. But of course, I don't want to force them to just say it. I just want them to feel comfortable among themselves. So I tend to divide into, group discussions, so that if they, comfortable with sharing their opinions with their friends, they can do it, and then can get some, the presenter of the group to share the idea of the whole group. And then the last thing is about punctuality, because we realize that when students, come late, it really affects, other colleagues. So that what they would prefer. Teaching tools, normally I will use, because this is Thai, curriculum. So that's why I tend to use Thai as well, mainly. But then lately I try to use Shepsi, textbook as well to let them, read English version as well. But I know that they have translation, but I still encourage them to read in English version. So apart from that, I also use journal articles because I would encourage, undergrad student to really think further about their future if they want to study in higher education, in master degree or PhD in the future. They're supposed to learn the structure of articles that they need to learn, particularly on the conceptual framework or theoretical frameworks. And then other than that will be UN or national NGO reports, and then international and national news. Normally, students will prefer me to really, encourage them to analyze about the news that happened globally and nationally, because they feel that they don't want to discuss something too abstract. They want something that they can really apply in their real life, and they can share with others as well. And one feedback that I got from students that now they can really discuss about human rights with their parents, because they feel that they know a lot of technical terms that they can really follow what their families or other academics really discuss. So kind of, enjoy to be involved in, in an adult group, that's what they said. And then I tend to invite my colleagues as guest lecturers, and actually not only from IHRP, but from other, faculty as well, who really involved in specific issues that we're gonna learn. For example, person with disabilities, I tend to invite a lecturer from Lasha Sudha College, and actually she's involved in, in the convention, person with disability convention as well. So she will be able to really share. And before COVID, I tend to bring students to the college in order to see the facilities for person with disability as well. Challenges, I would say, since this course is 3 credit, but it's elective course, so students tend to come from, pure science, not really social science, and no law background. So what I did, I try not to start with the law, but I try to start with the case studies, because this course is called Concepts and Case Study of Human Rights. And then I realized that it's too hard to start with law, of course. So I tend to give the overview of, background of human rights evolution, and then try to throw the concept and principles to them to really apply when we discuss about a case. Like we discuss about torture and forced disappearance, we tend to show the video clips, and we tend to let them learn from victims' families, and then let them discuss about what they think about this, situation. Do you think that torture is far away from your case? Do you think that you will not really experience this at all? Why? And then they tend to realize that, oops, actually it's really close to their life. So pretty much like try to let them realize that human rights, violations can happen to them. They can be violated at any point. Since I struggle a lot, I really think that I should do research about what they really think. So I try to apply human rights education theory of change, of Tibbetts, and the researcher, and then apply to my course, because I really want to know, since 2015 until now 2022, anything that I can do for students. And I realized that I cannot even just only teach them to know or raise awareness of human rights, but I supposed to really ensure that in the future they can be, the change agent So I did this research a couple years ago, and I realized that students tend to, aware of this, but then apart from that, they tend to, want to involve with, any kind of awareness raising. So they tend to share, since they prefer to do TikTok or video clips or infographics, they tend to share on their Facebook groups, and then they tend to share their knowledge and skills with their colleagues who have not really taken this course before. So I realized that the thematic issues and the specific rights of group of people tend to help them to understand at the beginning of I would say the overview of human rights. But if I would say if they really become change agent, I don't think that my course can really reach or achieve that goal yet. But hopefully I will continue to encourage them, but encourage them to study further. But recently, I got good feedback from undergrad student who study in religious college. He just told me that he applied for the scholarship, and he got scholarship, and he just joined with other ASEAN students on human rights. And another one got a job after he graduated from his his faculty, but then he just say is kind of human rights course really help him to aware of how to treat people, how to respect others, but still they cannot really be a change agent at this moment. Yeah, that pretty much I have to do.
Thank you so much to Dr. Ling Hoy and Dr. Patricia and Dr. Naparat for sharing. I was just really happy to be listening to all three of you because practically we are experiencing the same experiences, especially when Dr. Patricia was saying that maybe it was a bad idea suggesting human rights, to be a required course, because that's exactly where we are at UMS. The human rights here at our faculty, it's part of the international relations program. So my colleague here, Marja, is actually the trained legal scholar, but then it is I'm the one teaching human rights, coming from the background of development and peace studies. So it is a required course in our international relations program, but hopefully by next year it will be a required course for the whole faculty of social science, where we will have 700 students. But then it's also refreshing to see all the types of assessment that everybody has been doing and sharing. I think we have the same experiences in terms of assessment, and really the struggle is how do we put limitations in the kind of course syllabus that we have. I find it also interesting that with Dr. Ling Hoy's courses, there's actually two types of courses. So that gives me also an idea, how you try to find distinction, from the two, between the two courses. While we only have one human rights course under international relations program, we also try to do everything all together, but then as many of you have done, from time to time, it depends on the kind of resources that we get. Like we would invite speakers. Sometimes we would be able to get speakers, let's say from the Sabah Law Society, and the legal experts, whom we would request a session on the federal Constitution of Malaysia and human rights, and even access to justice. So from time to time, we would do that if they are able to spend their time with us. Yeah, so I will stop here for now.
In fact, the Human Rights in Southeast Asia course is additional course. I mean, it is not something that I'm required to do. However, it is an opportunity to introduce human rights education in the University Malaya, because the space is open for any of us who are willing to take up extra teaching hours. So while it can be very heavy, just like how Aisha and Patricia's face, so how I overcome that is to make it more flexible in terms of the syllabus, because we own the program. I'm not sure in a different context, some university might be more rigid, but in my context, there is a space that I can use, and there's a flexibility on my teaching style in terms of getting the help from outside. I do not have the financial resources, but for that class, I get a lot more help from the practitioners from the industry to come in to teach. So, and also hence, that's why I'm using the Shape C textbook. Shape C textbook basically has helped everything. Everything is there. Case studies is there. So before I introduce, I already weighed in my capacities to actually run the course. So those are the things that I make sure is available and it is I can cope before I actually move towards the other steps. And I know some of my colleagues, what they do is that they first get a few colleagues together to co-share a course. I think for those who intends to introduce a new course on human rights related courses, but yet have faced all these limitation, is that, and sometimes I think in the University of Malaya, I realized that although currently I'm the one who teach on the human rights course, but doesn't mean I'm the only one that actually know a bit more about human rights. There are many colleagues who sometimes we are not aware that they actually can teach some of the course. I think that's where we combine their resources in terms of when you have the syllabus, they can be good in certain syllabus, as in they can take out a few weeks. We take out a few weeks. So that is how then you combine. And I think that is one of the alternatives that I can share. I also keep my students connected to each other via mobile phone, as in the WhatsApp or whatsoever in the group. And with that, it is a more informal approach in which we learn not only in the classroom when we meet for that 2 hours. So whenever there's a programs on human rights or news about human rights that is interesting, we will share in the group, and also to encourage the students to do the same thing. So in that way, I think it is quite useful to also enhance their knowledge and the interest and the passion, so that they are living in that kind of environments continuously, and not just when there is a class with you on human rights, and also to expose themselves to the program beyond the outside the campus, means give them the opportunities if you know there are slots for the students to attend. I will try to make any attempts that is possible to actually give them some exposures.
Since you may have limitations on how you can encourage more discussion on human rights, using online platforms, I had the chance to be teaching online with Spring University on topics on gender and conflict. And in that forum, I realized already the limitations of the students, that they will not be possible for them to do online research at all. So what we did is that I encouraged them to do their own interviews, or to do their field work wherever they are, and try to find some interesting stories, about how they can demonstrate issues about gender in their area where they are located. So maybe that way, then if you can only just give them a guide, okay, what are the questions that they should be asking, and then let them present all these stories, the small stories that they can find within their neighborhood.
For my human rights in Southeast Asia course, definitely I'm dealing with a different level of knowledge when it comes to human rights for the undergraduate students. So for this semester, there will be 95 students. So among the 95, I have not met them, but they come from all the different faculties in the whole universities. So different disciplines, different background and the level of knowledge. And for the past two sessions that I have run, what I normally do is in the first class, I will tap on what do they know about human rights first by having quiz. So that is a level, and also to get a sense of how they feel about human rights. So because for me, teaching human rights needs a lot of discussion and understanding, especially for students who are not from social sciences or legal background. Then I will put them in a group by mixing them together. So by mixing those who do not have that much of knowledge on human rights with the others, some who might have more understanding about human rights. So that's how then I put up them in a group with the peer learning. Then so far it has been working quite well, but of course in our universities we always have evaluation. So I'm not sure, I think this should be something that all the university would have, evaluations to our teachings and the knowledge and things like that. So each session, when it finished, there will be evaluation and a comment for me to see where I can actually improve and so forth. Yeah. So those are the things that maybe can be helpful.
This is something that I would like them to really share when they read something like respect or some kind of equality or equity, and then let them share the definition first in order to see the knowledge level. And then later on, after I found that some students, they tend to, really share their opinions in a private sphere, I tend to put them in a group by designing the game called World Cafe. So that World Cafe will really allow, the shy students to be note taker, and another one can be a facilitator who can serve as a presenter later on. The person who would like to really speak, in public, but then I would not really let the student who really shy to be away from the class. So try to put them as a note taker, and then be a sharing person, and then later on I will make another games like a dating, so that everyone can really share, can partner up and then share their views with the whole class. So that pretty much to let them learn among themselves, because for me, I don't think I'm going to be the best person who share everything with them. I would love them to share something that, really advanced in terms of their generation. Particularly, I don't know anything much about IT, and then I tend to ask them, okay, if you don't know the knowledge that much, but how could you really raise awareness in your way? I remember last year got student from engineering guys, and he's tend to be really, really shy. He didn't really talk that much, but then when I put him in a group session, I found that he talked a lot, but then he felt really uncomfortable to share in public. So, and then later on, when I asked them to kind of sum up as a group, I found that this person tend to be the person who love to write, instead of sharing, speaking in public. So this is the way that I kind of encourage them to express or share their knowledge. And then another techniques, I would say, I tend to encourage them to apply their specialization too. For example, for student right now, I have a student from nursing school. I tend to ask them which rights that they really interested. They say right to health. So I say, okay, then you focus on right to health. Then when I ask engineering student from engineering, they say, okay, I'm interested in migrant workers' rights. And then another group from business, I say, what kind of rights you interested? They say, okay, Ajahn, how about, ICSER, business and human rights, maybe they can apply, and then they can really put in their portfolio that they have been learning about this. So this kind of techniques that I try to let them focus on what they really interested, instead of, forcing them to know everything, advanced. That's the technique I share, Kata.
Actually, the diversity of knowledge has been our issues, even among the law students, because some actually are very good and then have interest. The other one forget about it. I think what we applied, and this kind of disparity of knowledge has been our main issue every time we have discussions and evaluations. I think we decided basically among ourselves, saying that one is don't be ambitious. Second of all, be realistic, meaning actually this kind of gap still exists. So the most important thing is actually the gap shouldn't be that high, and at least the student gets something. I think that's our principle. Basically, this is what we agreed among the lectures, because sometimes it's been like we are very frustrated about that. And then how we cope with it, the first is basically we set up really requirements, for mandatory requirements to join the course. So considering that this is mandatory course, they need basically, they have to take it anyway. So they have to take the previous requirements. At least in that case, we know that they are already have something. But the problem is when it comes to student exchange student, as well as student from other faculties, that's our really our problem. Usually what we offer is extra course prior to matriculations, we call it, prior to the course itself, because otherwise he or she will just destroy the dynamic of the class. Of course, we struggle with 700, but we divided the classes and we kind of understand the dynamic, and then we already pinpoint, several students who is really stubborn and having a problems, from the beginning. Once the student having a problem, and this is stereotype, but it's usually it's like that. One student have an issue one, and then it carry on. Usually, not always, yeah, not always, but usually that's not good actually. But again, sometimes we already pick who actually the troublemakers, or who actually have we need basically to give affirmative actions. And then the third way to do it, we do actually the field trip, and then they divide it into groups, so they can at least talk each other and then discuss something. And then the trip, usually we go to the prison, either the Alcatraz, Indonesian Alcatraz prison, or the other prison, or the court, and then they have a group assignment. They need basically to present afterwards, and then the presentations have to be done by all members. Usually we divide it into 5. Therefore we have like very long presentation sessions. Sometimes it's more than 2-3 hours, and I'm really sorry. That's why we are so demanding about that, about the course. But that's how we try to cope the situations. For the small classes, for example, international class, because it's always like 40 students, for examples, then we do actually use we do some offline activities, like for example the ice breaking, and then modeling, and then case studies. But for the big one, our ice breaking become the Kahoot, for example. We are using the Kahoot, we are using Mentimeter, we are using the GDoc, whatever available to make us easy. That includes basically with assignment. Our eyes, I think, becomes in the end of semester we got crazy, with 700 assignments, like And then afterwards, there will be complaints from the students too. Oh my God, that's like the super crazy. Therefore, we use actually the multiple choices. That's one way to do it. And of course, multiple choices is easy to score, but it's so hard basically to formulate the questions. It's much easier actually with the essay, but we got crazy writing down 700 times 2, mid-test and final. So, and usually the way Ibu Harkistuti, that's why it's Prof. Harkistuti, we have to do it ourselves, no assistance at all. So far that we're trying actually to cope with the diversity of knowledge, but be realistic and then accept that this is actually the weaknesses, and at least what we could do is just to fill the gap so it's not really as high as before. I think that's my suggestion so far based on my experience.
Like in our program, International Relations, the human rights program is introduced in their final year, 3rd year. But when they are in their 2nd year, they take up also a course on public international law. So from that, then they already are introduced to the international norms and regime. So when they do human rights, they are well prepared in understanding how human rights is related to IR. Yeah. There are instances that students do want to discuss human rights and religion, particularly with Islam, because and then that is the time that I would, bring up, explain a bit about the Cairo Declaration, to some extent, and then I try to find some journal articles that are published here in Malaysia about how human rights is explained in Islam. But because I'm not an expert on Islamic studies, then I just try to give them more references, for further reading. So that is one area, for the future. Second is that given that we have all experience doing online teaching and all these online applications, and knowing now that despite that we have our free textbook, not many students actually read the textbook from page 1 to the end. So that is really the reality of this generation, that it's so hard to get them to read, even though you just tell them like, you just have to read this one textbook and then you should be able to pass human rights. Still, they end up not really reading everything. So maybe for further resources, I noticed that students are really very good with all these applications and games, all this online facility. So I remember one time a friend, based in Manila was telling me that to teach IHL, you just ask your students to play Clash of, I think there's a certain game like Clash of Titans or Clash of Civilization, something like that. So that's how he would demonstrate international humanitarian law. So maybe in the future, there is a way to come up with a simple game, on human rights, and I think there are also some fields who try to attempt to come up with these kinds of games, whether it's a card game or whether it's an online game.
I think first is the need to look at what Aisha mentioned, the question maybe how to teach human rights as part of IR. I think that is somehow what I get the sense of because being trained in international relations, there is a challenge in terms of making human rights interesting, because that discipline itself makes the state actors as the main actor. So non-state actors, non-traditional securities are difficult to actually explain to the students that human rights is actually important. That could be the challenge that we are all facing when we are putting human rights course in the program that is for international relations. But I would like to tackle this question in a broader view, because it is not just about that particular course that call with the name human rights, but we have to see the design of that whole program. So the whole program sometimes While you have one course on human rights, but you might have courses on security issues or non-traditional securities and things like that. So that whole program design has to be in line. And we cannot dismiss the other courses that, while they do not teach human rights specifically, to be totally out of human rights lens. So I think that is a broader views. But what I normally do at the department level with that whole program, Bachelor of Arts, International and Strategic Studies, is to first a briefing to the students that emphasize when we talk about IR, there's a trend of the non-traditional securities and the non-state actors have become at the forefront. So this approach is agreed throughout the whole departments. So we are quite aligned to each other when we teach and design the course within our syllabus. So that, but so far, with that kind of approach, that means not to have our human rights course to be isolated from the whole program. So far, it works somehow. And on my side, we also have courses such as social movements and democratization, in which I teach. So those are the courses that, you know, we have hardcore security courses, but at the same time, we have non-traditional securities about human securities and things like that, that we actually complement to each other. So that's what I can actually offer in how to make your IR course to have a little bit more focus on the human rights approach.
Teaching human rights in international relations. I think there is a common ground between human rights and international relations, which is about the important roles of state actors. You know, this is not just about public international laws, but it's also international relations. So it's about the importance of state actors, state obligations. In the same time, as Jinghui has mentioned, different theories would be bringing in different actors in international relations. You know, non-state actors are becoming now subject of international relations. We are no longer just using realist theory, for example. So I think there's some common grounds between human rights and international relations. So if you start with that, then it would help introducing students into the later part of the course. That is the second thing that I would be suggesting, having been teaching human rights international relations for, I think, about 15, 20 years or so. The third one, I like the ideas, and I think that has to be done of Yinghui and Ayesa, which is to ensure that, you know, it's not just one course, but, you know, human rights components, human rights elements could be included in other courses as well. So that, you know, you are not isolating any particular course that this is about human rights international relations, because actually human rights could be included in other courses very well, making sure that human rights are integrated, you know, into different courses, and making sure that there is a kind of, you have a whole holistic approach to the whole curriculum, not just one course, as advised by Yinghui.
We also receive a lot of students actually from the neighbor, which is actually the Faculty of Social Science. And in fact, what we did actually is to combine both. In the principal matters, actually, as Ajahn already highlighted, that is basically general. But then the in-depth discussions that will be actually depending on the background of the students itself. For example, you know, the theory used is a bit different about the theory of justice, and this is the theory of international relations, for example. But what we teach actually is just more on the principles, and then they can actually implement or put it whatever their perspective is when it comes to basically assignment. That's what we do, because we cannot put everything in within like 90 minutes, you know, discussions. That's what we are trying to do. And then in order to have, that's the dynamic, the how to call it, they can talk each other. So usually they will work together in the group.
For me, I tend to use, you know, the national work plan that and bilateral and multicultural agreements that the Thai government has done with other countries. For example, on a migration policy that links to human trafficking. I tend to really kind of encourage them to see how Thai government really applied to other countries, pretty much like focus on the policy, because I'm not really specialized in international relations, but so far pretty much like look at the policy at the international, regional, and yeah, international level. Yeah, that's pretty much.
Human rights could be integrated into, our disciplines, our courses, including pure science or applied science, not only history. In fact, human rights is about history of struggle. So, if you look at the history, there have been always, human rights in there. It really depends on how you pick up. I just give you one example, that the development of human rights system at the UN, was built on the history of atrocities, of Holocaust, of genocide before and during the Second World War. So if you start with that, you can see a very close link between human rights and history already. So this is the first thing. The second thing is that history itself is interdisciplinary. Either you approach from law perspective, from international relations perspective, from sociological perspective, or some others. So it really depends on the approach that you are currently using when you are teaching history. But I don't think there is a clear separation between human rights and history, because it's part and parcel of of each other. So that would be my answer.
What I wanted to emphasize here is actually the impact. I guess the impact and the contributions of the course to the development of the society. Actually, this is one of the issue that is emphasized in the Faculty of Law, because one of the criteria actually imposed by the university is about the impact. So we need basically to be able to measure the impact. But of course, it's very, very difficult one. But at least in our objectives, as already mentioned before, there are two objectives that when we are designing the project is when we are designing the course, is that to get a knowledge as well as to do the analysis. But there is another thing, the analysis goes actually with the belief. And this actually will give implications to the selections of the teaching team, the team teaching. Since considering that all of us in the Faculty of Law, University of Indonesia, we belong to the Human Rights Center. So we really ensure that all the teachers believe, or whatever their opinion, in the line with whatever we believe, in the sense, this is just examples, the death penalty. So we don't want, hopefully, we don't want to have someone who is actually promoting death penalty, for examples, teaching in the class, because this will destroy the whole dynamic. Of course, we allow for some controversial issues, and we allow students basically to say that we are basically agree with the death penalty. However, but we want to convey a message. For example, like this is basically the death penalty. We need to abolish death penalty. Is this in the line with, for examples, LGBT? In Depok, in the place, actually LGBT is prohibited. But we want to carry something saying that you look, at least you have to respect something. It goes by saying actually to the selections of lectures. And we are very meticulous. We are very, careful enough to ask the teachers, other lecturers, basically to join teaching the course, because we want to have kind of the same value, not necessarily, at least if they have different values. So we make sure that it will not come out, or we can actually reformatting, so it can become like edu advocacy. We call it edu advocacy, education's based advocacy. That's one thing that I learned from the reflections that we do when it comes to selection of the teachers, preparing materials, and also trying to contribute to the current situations in the country.
I think for me, I focus on 3 human rights dimensions when I design the course. You know, actually, I try to revise my course syllabus every year, and I just have to balance between the knowledge, skills, and attitude. So the way to really encourage students to to learn, I would say it start with enjoyment of learning. I ask them the questions, why do you think you need to study human rights since the beginning? Because this is elective course for them. So then I tend to invite them to see the history with the mistakes of, you know, the mankind in the past. Let them learn that when they violate other people's rights, what really happened? World War I, World War II, you know, and then let them see what about, you know, in the country, what really happened and what kind of effects that really, you know, really push us in a corner and say, hey, it's time for respect among, you know, human beings here. And then, of course, later on, I show them the evolution of human rights instruments to see why these legal instruments really matter and the effects of having this, why it is so important for their life. And like I even mentioned that why really have to care about racial discriminations here? Why you think that is important? You think that only Thai here in this world, and you think that you're gonna meet only Thai people? No, you're gonna meet other, you know, who may have no legal status, and then you cannot really respect them, or yeah. And I try to encourage them, invite them to really enjoy the controversial issues, as Patricia just mentioned about, you know, death penalty, and I even mentioned about freedom of religion versus, you know, abortion, to let them, you know, share what they think based on human rights principle, based on their religious background and even other, you know, belief. That's the thing that I tend to focus on, the enjoyment of discussion. And then I would not really give them, you know, the answer, ultimate answer, but tend to question them back to study further. You know, like right now, we don't have, you know, convention on the rights of elderly. I say, why? We don't have right here, right now, but then many countries in this world will, you know, being a, you know, aging society, or even LGBTIQ, we don't really have, you know, hard law. What we just have, you know, principle. So this kind of thing that I try to encourage them to think further for that generation, instead of just a, okay, only 9 conventions enough. No, we need to think further for your generation, next generation. How about, you know, how to become really global citizens, how to build your global talents. That's the key thing that we I try to encourage them to think about, not just only how much money you're gonna get in the future. You have to think about how you're gonna really survive with other human beings with respect, and, you know, mitigate the violation, human rights violations. That pretty much I will share that. I divide the assessment into, you know, individual and group project. That means they have to write, they have to have a written assignments, right? But then for skill, I would say I tend to focus on the interpersonal discussion in class, among students, because sometimes it shows that some students frown on different opinions, and then talk back in a way of respect or whatever. So that kind of thing that it show I can observe from the way they interact in class, and also based on the answer that they respond to the question I asked. For example, like last week we just teach about torture and enforced disappearance, and because in Thailand we don't really have act on these issues yet, so we tend to really encourage them to look at the draft that proposed by NGOs and the governments, and we let them learn about why our policymakers never approve, a politician never approve, and invite them to share. And then they realize that, John, I think maybe because it's going to be hard for policemen to really torture. And I was like, oh, here you go. Okay, now you understand, at some point that, sometimes policy, it's really linked, to their operation, and, can put us in danger very easily, right? So, and then even talking about LGBTIQ, rights on marriage, right? Because in Thailand, even though I think many people think that in Thailand, LGBTIQs have been, approved by the society, but it's not enough, right? So we tend to invite them to say, okay, so you think that what else we should have, what kind of laws that we should really, indicate in our national law, compared to Jakarta principles, right? Since we have only principle, not really hard law, what else? And then luckily that in our class, we have different religious backgrounds of students. They, Muslim, they are Buddhists and Christians, right? So we discuss based on the belief and, their religions too. So it's quite interesting. And we also, invite them to discuss about, legal abortion, that, and then I just exemplified on the Philippines case as well, what really happened. And so I share, continue studying about what really happened, because I'm not really Christian. But then luckily I got, the answer from students who are Christian too. So I would say I try to encourage students to discuss based on their, background and based on their study, and also try to, I would say, assess them fairly, right? I do not really expect them to, answer everything, based on what I think, but I tend to let them, share something, propose something, recommend something that it would be good for their generation, right? Because in the future is their turn to propose, very effective policies that can be implemented too.
We want to evaluate behavior and attitude within the framework of the, our course curriculum following the Ministry of Education. It's so hard to demonstrate that. So that's why, for one, we don't do assessment of class participation. Like there was one time that I had 3 undergraduate students from China, these 3 Chinese boys. And then one of the group project was for them to be spending a day with this school, alternative school for undocumented Filipino children. So the group organized an activity, for the whole school. And as a result of that, at the end of and that's what I evaluated, the kind of activities that they did in that school. But at the end of the activity, then these 3 Chinese boys came up to me and asked me, can they go back to the school? And they want to do something, with the kids. They want to bring food for the kids and just spend time with them. So that is also one interesting, observation or change of attitude and behavior. But then again, you cannot really give a grade for that kind of impact.
In the University of Malaya, students are allowed to audit the class, as in they join as audit students. They do not take up like exam or anything like that. They just sit in. So I used to receive this kind of request, and for me, normally I'll just allow these students, because these students are they are not taking our program that has the component of human rights course, but yet they are interested. So I think that is one of the approach that can be used. I also find that, in all, either Malaysia or Myanmar, I believe on the student activists who are really interested with the courses like this. So in the past, those student activists, at least in the context of University Malaya, normally they will approach the lecturers who are teaching on this sort of courses and get advisors and things like that. And I think those are perhaps the things that, quite satisfying, apart from it's not really about the classroom setting only when it comes to teaching and learning, rather on how you expand that networks to reach out to other. Perhaps something I can share is that see our students as part of our courses, not only as a students, but be together in the course, which I find it very useful, because it is a learning process that I must say, it is not about them learning from us, but I've been learning a lot from them, especially human rights is things that needs continuous debates and so forth. So I think from the interaction with the students, it helps me to change my syllabus every semester, so that I can improve on. So I think those are the just that I would like to share. Thank you.
For me, I think the key is actually the preparations before as well as after the sessions. You have to prepare everything, and then if you don't have any good preparations, so it's really difficult basically to implement as well as to do the evaluations. And make sure that you do also the evaluations, and the evaluations has to come from both sides, from the students as well as from the lecturer itself. And also how you score students, that's also another point that need to be underlined, because that's basically the source of conflicts later on if it's not really clear from the beginning. How even, for example, making analysis, or even to make a project. So all the indicators, all the, what is it called, a percentage has to be not only communicated, but has to be thought through, from the beginning. I think that's my additional point.
First, I may have different things when I talk to myself before I teach, so maybe I may share several of them if you don't mind. First, 3 human rights dimensions: knowledge, skills, and attitude, for me applied to not only students but myself as a lecturer. So that means first, the capacity building. I always think that I cannot stop learning. Like here, I joined you, I feel like I learned something from all of you too. So the same, when I'm in class, I always think that student is like my teacher as well. So talk to myself, I always talk to myself, never stop learning, and learning new things, from different groups of people, including students. And second thing, try to make enjoyable class that students feel that they can enjoy, sharing something that they never dare to share in their, faculty. That always my students talk to me that, Ajahn, you know what? I will never dare to share my opinions to my lecturers in my faculty, because they will yell at me and say, who want to hear from you, right? So I try to make them feel that they can enjoy sharing. And then third, I try to remind them of the key human rights principles, particularly the respect, no matter what, they graduated or after they graduated, they are in any society or they have high ranking in, in their society or whatever. Do never forget this key principle. And I talk to myself too. So tend to be a good model for students as much as I could. Sometimes I feel like I bullying students by teaching the way they highlight their hair or whatever, and then they just have to admit to them that, oh, I'm sorry, I think I bully you. So I tend to let them know that everyone can make mistake, but try to be cautious on whatever you really do or behave. And then I try to talk to myself that I have to listen to students more than I talk, because that's the way to kind of check how much they understand the lesson that we share in class. And then the last thing that I always heard from students about, score. Ajahn, what kind of, questions you're gonna ask? So I talk to myself, I set the rule with them that, hey, do not worry, because fair gradings, that the things that I would do to you. I would never ask them questions that I don't teach in class. I always share, the grading indicators. For example, reading assignments, what I'm looking for, what kind of A students supposed to, to do, B+ or B. Okay, and then ask them if these indicators really make sense or really fair for them or is achievable, because everyone wants to get A. So particularly students who take this kind of elective course. So I just have to ensure that they feel really comfortable with the course syllabus, with my personality, and even other students as well in class or their colleagues, because I think it's important to make a very safe zone for them to be themselves. I just try to say, okay, whatever you would like to do in class, if it's not really violate other colleagues, you can do. If you go to restroom, you don't have to ask for permission. You can go whenever you like, but then you should come back for the class. So pretty much about, for me, human rights course is something for me to practice myself too. Not only knowledge, but skills and attitude, the way I treat students. That's the key things that I try to let them know that I'm not just only lecturer, but I'm your friends. I'm just one of human beings that you have to deal with. So if you can really apply human rights principles that you learn from class, not only concepts or principles, but you can really transform those principles and concepts into your practice in such an honest way. That's the most important for my class. That's all I want to share.
When you teach human rights, the first thing you really need to have is actually you believe in it, because you cannot teach anything that you don't believe in it, in my opinion. So it's important. The second one, as Ajahn Naparat mentioned, is not just about knowledge. So you are teaching human rights not only from your head, but also from your heart. head and heart, we have to go together, because if you just teach from your head, then it's about knowledge. The third one, making your class enjoyable, so that students would like to come, really looking forward to your class. Well, I don't have that kind of experience, because my class is not very enjoyable. But believe me that my students are looking forward to my class, although not enjoyable, because they know that they will be having space for discussion. And the last thing that I would like to emphasize is making sure that the classroom is the safe place where students enjoy space and freedom to express themselves. This is important. We had a session on academic freedoms. So it's not just freedoms of academics, meaning ourselves, but also freedom of students to express themselves. The word that Ajahn Bharat has been using throughout is respect, respect, respect. So I would like to end this session with respect, respect, and respect, because that I think the very basis for human rights and human rights teaching as well. Yeah.